Crane lived from 1871 to 1900. He was the youngest child in his family with 13 older siblings. He grew up in New Jersey but went to college in New York, where he studied the Civil War and went through military training. He ended up dropping out of college to become a journalist because he thought that humans were more interesting than school curriculum. He lived in a poor part of town called the Bowery, where he wrote about poverty in a new genre called naturalism, or extreme realism. He had a hard time getting his early work published because publishers thought that it would be too shocking for readers. It was with his second novel, The Red Badge of Courage, that Crane really got famous. It was about a soldier in the Civil War who runs away from battle. Later, he feels guilty about this and wishes for an injury or a red badge of courage. Shortly before he died, Crane met a woman named Cora Taylor, who he moved to England with as his common-law wife. For a short time after moving to England, Crane also served in the Spanish-American War, but then moved back to America with Cora before dying at age 28 from tuberculosis. By the end of his life, he had written several novels, poems, and short stories. In fact, a lot of Stephen Crane's work revolved around the Civil War, which is probably due to the fact that he was born just 6 years after the war ended. The Civil War understandably had a significant impact on the United States, as 2 to 3% of the population died. With today's population, that would mean more than 6 million people dead. One of the reasons there were so many casualties was that this was the first war after the Industrial Revolution, so guns were more deadly and could be constantly shipped out to the front. Telegraphs had also recently been invented, so soldiers on the front could be updated much more quickly than ever before. There was also a considerable change in the social and political areas of the United States. It was after the Civil War that slavery was banned, all males received voting rights, women's rights started to come into play, Reconstruction and Jim Crow laws were passed, and the KKK was organized. With changes like these happening, it's really no wonder that the nation was in a state of turmoil. Fast rode the knight, with spurs hot and reeking, ever waving an eager sword to save my lady. Fast rode the knight, and leaped from saddle to war. Men of steel flickered and gleamed, like a riot of silver lights, and the gold of the knight's good banner still waved on a castle wall. A horse, blowing, staggering, bloody thing, forgotten at foot of castle wall. A horse, dead at foot of castle wall. There is no evident rhyme scheme or meter in this poem. However, it starts off with the phrase "fast rode the knight," which is repeated on the 5th line as well, which creates a bit of a rhythm. On the 2nd line, Crane describes the knight's spurs as hot and reeking. Reeking in this case means to give off smoke, and while spurs are usually thought of as the little spiked wheels on a rider's shoes, it can also mean something that drives someone forward, so the knight is moving fast as he can towards his goal. On the next 2 lines, the knight is described as waving an eager sword to save his lady, his end goal. In all his eagerness, the knight then jumps off his horse right into the war, blindly moving to his lady. On the 7th line, Crane uses a metaphor to compare the knights, who wear silver armor, to men made out of steel or metal, giving them a more heroic feeling. On the next line, Crane compares these men of steel to a riot of silver lights, which makes it seem beautiful in a way that war is usually not. By line 9, the knight's good gold banner waves on the castle wall, suggesting that the knight has slayed all the villains and rescued the princess. Obviously, there's a lot of suggestion that this was a brave fight, and that the knight has just won, as seen by the fact that the banner is gold, which is usually seen as a victorious color, and that Crane even uses the word good to further emphasize his heroicism. With this, it seems as if the poem could be over, but Crane continues with an ellipses, which also serves as the volta of the poem. It gives the readers a pause and clearly indicates the change in mood. Crane also uses the next line to slow down the poem by making it short and adding a comma at the end. He talks about the horse that the knight had abandoned earlier, which is now a blowing, staggering, bloody thing, and blowing in this case means breathing heavily. He uses the repetition of a horse in lines 11 and 14 to really focus in on the horse, and again in lines 13 and 15 of At Foot of Castle Wall to hone in on the fact that the horse was forgotten there by the knight and dead because of it. With his poem Faster of the Night, Stephen Crane questions if all the loss that accompanies war is really worth it in the end. This would make sense especially for his time, as such a large number of Americans were killed in a battle against America itself. While it was incredibly important to abolish slavery, one thing that Crane was probably thinking about when he wrote this poem was if the war really needed to happen. If America, like the brave knight, had gotten so caught up in the glory of war that it hadn't stopped to think about the things that go along with war, such as death and destruction, like with the horse. The country had been able to come to a settlement of some sort instead of jumping straight into war. Hundreds of thousands of lives could have been saved. This poem also prompts readers to think about their own small battles, and if the ends outweigh the means. There are consequences for each choice, and our lives are dictated by them. Crane warns us not to be like the knight, who does not think of these first, and instead eagerly chooses the one with the most glory.